I hear people saying, Lars, what are you doing making a video about Star Wars? Isn't this a channel where you make up fake science nonsense? No. This has always been a Star Wars channel. Call me Klieg LarsPorsenna. Well then, what science fiction aspect will we be looking at to pretend to learn some real science with? Well, I was going to talk about the blue shadow virus, but there will be no science today, my young Padawan. Instead, I want to have a peek at the 3-episode Battle of Mon Cala arc from the start of Season 4 of Clone Wars, which has been festering in my mind for almost a decade now since it aired late in 2011. The reason for this is fourfold. This.
Now, tell me, where is Prince lee-char?
Fucking what they did to my boy. This. And the weird politics.
The might of your ancestors give you strength.
Unfortunately, the video is solely going to focus on the weird politics. Now I hear what you're saying. Ugh! Politics in my children's media? Yes, sadly politics has somehow managed to infiltrate the sacred texts. Now the political landscape is actually a bit hard to determine specifically, not because it isn't abundantly clear what's going on, but because the good guys are the good guys and need to be good guys. So in these canon episodes, there are 2 sentient species on the planet, the Mon Calamari and the Quarren. The Mon Calamari give their name to the planet, star system, and galactic sector, and rule with a hereditary absolute monarchy over the entire planet, and the Quarren are separate but equal. Additionally, the Mon Calamari suffer from the classic Star Wars problem of Admiral Ackbar being fantastic, and so the segregationist society they've developed can't be explicitly bad. A second layer of a similar vein is that the Separatists are ruled by evil wizards, while the Republic is too, but also good-ish.
I love the Republic.
And it means we have to do some kind of weird things to ignore these addenda. Let's see if speeding through the plot will illuminate anything. Water War opens with the quote, "When destiny calls, the chosen have no choice." And then we're hit with this voiceover.
Water wars. Tensions run high on the ocean world of Mon Calamari, where 2 separate peoples, the aggressive squid-like Quarren and their peaceful neighbor the Mon Calamari, struggle to maintain a fragile coexistence. Adding to this strife, the king of the Mon Calamari has been found mysteriously murdered, leaving his young son Prince lee-char to guide his people alone. But the Quarren race will not accept the new ruler as their king. Senator Amidala and her Jedi bodyguard have arrived to help resolve the matter and to avoid plunging the planet into civil war.
Being pretty impressive propaganda, already qualifying the silly good guy, bad guy dichotomy with completely blatant lies, which become obvious exceedingly soon. With our consent manufactured, we have some context for these episodes, and we start with some debate about new rulership after the previous monarch died, showing the species conflict that is brewing. The separatist observer Ref Tamsin, herein known as Shark Boy obviously, makes himself known, and Captain Ackbar demonstrates how peaceful the Mon Calamari are. The inevitable breakdown of negotiations is blamed on the separatists stirring up the Quarren, and the Republic and Mon Cala prepare for conflict. The lack of experience the heir apparent possesses is highlighted to build to a resolution of the opening quote by the end of the arc, and a droid army lands on the planet. Count Dooku is shown to be behind the insurrection, as predicted by Yoda. Then we have the brilliant comedy of Prince lee-char stating he does not believe the Quarren will attack.
I do not believe the Quarren will attack.
Immediately being followed by Shark Boy ordering an attack.
Attack!
Giving us the terrible line from Ackbar.
It's an attack!
Republic reinforcements arrive, and the Separatists retreat for a moment before bringing in big jellyfish, and they retreat to the caves.
The safest place is in the caves.
I agree, Your Highness. Follow me.
Before we see the real power dynamic between the Quarren and Shark Boy.
Disobey a command from Count Dooku again, and I will kill you where you stand.
Ending the first episode on some stupid lesson about living to fight another day.
The hardest lesson a commander can learn. How to live to fight another day.
Episode 2 opens far more neutrally than the first.
A government toppled by civil war. Refusing to accept Prince lee-char as the next ruler of Mon Cala, the Quarren people join the Separatist Alliance and launch an all-out attack on the Mon Calamari. Caught unprepared, the young prince and his Jedi protectors are quickly overwhelmed and forced to retreat into caves far below the capital city, leaving Count Dooku and his allies to plan their next move.
And we see a reinforcement of the relationship between the Quarren and Shark Boy, wherein the Quarren are told that they must be evil by Count Dooku. The remaining good guys attempt to flee the planet, but their ship is destroyed, while the Jedi contact the Gungans to send reinforcements. Anakin pulls a radar building down with the Force. Then the Gungans arrive, and, jumping from the Venator Star Destroyer, most of them presumably die upon impact with the water. Though initially very effective, the Gungans ultimately lose too. Beginning with a joke, the voiceover brings us in.
A last gasp of hope. After the assassination of his father and the fall of his kingdom beneath a planetary civil war, Mon Cala Prince lee-char has gone into hiding with Padawan Ahsoka Tano as his only protector. With his armies captured and friends imprisoned, the situation seems hopeless for the prince. Count Dooku commands his sinister agent Riff Tamson to use any means necessary to bring Prince lee-char out of hiding, for he knows that hope does remain as long as the prince is alive.
And the episode Prisoners begins with all the captured Gungans, clones, Mon Cala, Anakin, Padme, Kit Fisto and Jar Jar being led away. Afterwards, Shark Boy tortures our heroes to try to learn where Prince lee-char is hiding. No Sarai, the head of the squids, starts getting cold feet because he is presumably anti-torture. We get the worst little scene in the prison camp, where lee-char is rallying the people. Then we get back to Abu Ghraib for a little bit, before Prince lee-char is arrested as part of his plan to get the Quarren on side. Jar Jar saves Padme's life.
Jar Jar sealed my helmet with his...
Yes, sir.
Prince lee-char attempts to convince No Sarai to join him before everyone is brought back together at the public execution of the prince. Here it turns out the prince was successful and the Quarren join with the Mon Cala and others to remove the Separatists and their droids, with Prince lee-char personally defeating Shark Boy in combat. Prince lee-char has his coronation and they all live happily ever after. Now this seems simple enough, right? Two groups of people, one seeks outside help to take control from the other, but the outside help is unreservedly evil and takes control themselves. So that group which sought the help joins with the other group they were trying to overthrow to return to the status quo. Okay, a bit weird but not too bad. Until you think about the implications of the context we learned about before, and the handful of asides in the episodes that allude to past conflict. Suddenly the outlined series of events becomes sort of fucky, and that's a technical sociological term. So attempting to parse the actual political scene here is a bit tricky, but we'll give it a try by presenting some hypotheses. Hypothesis A. Perhaps this is a reactionary, anti-revolutionary pacifism arc, stating that violence, even when used to overthrow oppression, is unjustified. It doesn't make any sense at all if we think about the episodes. There's a very clear moral distinction within the episodes that torture and slavery are bad, and were never intended by the Quarren. Furthermore, it's so extraordinarily inconsistent with everything else Star Wars is, what with the rebellion and all, so Hypothesis A is pretty shit at describing this arc. However, the anti-revolutionary point may be correct?
Great shot, kid. That was 1 in a million.
The next one is almost too obviously wrong and a bit stupid to even suggest, but again, we're just tossing out some hypotheses. Let's see how it fits. Hypothesis B. This is a pro-revolutionary story, where an oppressed people overthrowing their oppressors is shown to be necessary and good, even if it requires violence to achieve their ends. Okay, so this is just plainly wrong. The Quarren aggression is shown to be bad from the beginning, even before it's shown that they were being forced or coerced into taking particularly egregious actions, based on the kind of obscene opening voiceover, in addition to their alliance with the Separatists. We're not exploring justifications for Separatist action, for which there may be plenty. This exists entirely as shorthand for they are the bad guys. The torture just emphasizes that. Hypothesis C. This story is politically and thematically neutral, and the good guys and bad guys have no relationship to any context developed in the story. The context exists only as a veneer to facilitate a big fight. This is what we might call the gamer hypothesis, and even though it requires an empty head, it almost approximates what we actually observe. However, ignoring the political context to facilitate a story isn't the whole picture, because it's pretty clear the idea of destiny plays a role, and that the species conflict has some relevance, with multiple characters mentioning it in a manner which undercuts the idea that it has no functional bearing on the actions taken by those characters. Hypothesis D. This is a weird pro-monarchy story where the particulars of the conflict are effectively irrelevant except for where they serve to promote the idea that absolute hereditary rule is good and justified. Now this is a strange one, because it kinda feels like it, right? And I mean, what the fuck, Filoni? But I don't know if it's actually all that convincing, because no alternative is proposed. So I think the idea that it's pro-monarchy only exists insofar as we, outside the text, have a broad conception of absolute hereditary monarchy being shit, which it is. So when this monarchy is presented as neutral or perhaps apolitical and just an uncritical vehicle for character development or plot or whatever, it appears like the story is taking a pro-monarchy stance. So this one's also kind of missing something. Hypothesis E. This is a cautionary tale about the danger of revolutionary action being co-opted. Now this one is kind of interesting. In it, we take the context as having some relationship with the text, as in, it actually means something, and the plot also relates to that context, which is truly groundbreaking stuff compared to the other hypotheses. Unfortunately, the Quarren being convinced to return to the status quo through a combination of being unhappy about committing war crimes, a complete and unfailing loyalty to No Sarai, and I guess Prince lee-char's leadership? Charismatic wiles? Willingness to endanger himself, maybe? I think this completely neutralizes the justification for the Quarren revolt in the first place. The reason this is problematic for our hypothesis is that if the response of the Quarren to being double-crossed by the Separatists and not wanting to participate or facilitate torture and war crimes is to return to a subservient position in society rather than, literally anything else, why would they have pursued a violent revolution in the first place? As it stands, it makes it all feel like a plot contrivance rather than a developed conflict, which serves a different narrative than what would exist if this hypothesis were accurate. So the co-option of a revolutionary force is occurring, but the text doesn't actually have anything to say about it, and it's presented apolitically for plot progression. Hypothesis F. This is a story that believes the status quo is apolitical regardless of the presented political system, doing so to facilitate some conception of destiny. And this is the last hypothesis I'm presenting, but also comes disturbingly close to the gamer hypothesis in some regards. With this hypothesis, we can have the context of the segregation of the two species on Mon Calamari, and what an octopus supremacist hereditary absolute monarchy might mean for this planet, be selectively applied. A very important first step, and one which begins to veer away from the gamer hypothesis too, which is nice. This means we can still return to past conflict as a relevant feature, which we can use to legitimize the divine right of Prince lee-char and the Calamari throne, rather than build political justification for the Quarren actions. This is because the Calamari royal family can be presented as exceptional in that they're uniquely capable in fixing whatever past problems existed. So the politics feels irrelevant, but not because it doesn't impact the story or exist, but because it only matters when in selective situations. This divine right point may seem a bit much, but it's important for ascribing destiny to the resolution of the conflict, and justifying the weird monarchy aspect as literally preordained by God, and they really do go full hog on this. Okay, so we might have a roughly accurate hypothesis here. Where does this leave us? Well, I've presented this final hypothesis as an answer to what is actually being politically presented in this Clone Wars arc, but the answer requires sort of sidestepping some of the structural aspects of the politics presented. We're saying, yes, there's a political structure presented, but we don't engage with it completely, so as to be able to make a story about a likable, well, a theoretically likable character. And this kind of feels like a cop-out, don't you think?
What's he doing?
So we may need to go even further beyond. The arc is smart enough to have an unequal society with the oppressed people's revolutionary action being co-opted by outside forces.
No, stop it!
LarsPorsenna. But not smart enough to do anything beyond the evil guy's bad and the good guy's good.
It's unreal. How is he generating?
Such basic opinions.
Do it!
LarsPorsenna.
It's too much!
On top of that, they're too cowardly to actually show that their contextual premise matters across the board, because it would greatly undercut the classic, ultimate bullshit position.
Stop it! Stop it now!
LarsPorsenna. Being systems are both neutral and natural, and our goal should be simply to get the right guy in charge. And yet, even this position, as pathetic as it is, and it is pathetic, is completely enervated if the Quarren are on board with the assassination of the former king, who was supposedly the exact sort of good ruler the show is trying to imply makes a material difference in the suitability of an absolute ruler's rule. So the show itself isn't even convinced by its justification, which makes the selective application of the relevance of the context even flimsier. I think the actual conclusion is that to create this politically charged context as the impetus for conflict, and then pretend it isn't fundamentally important and completely relevant, while showing the opposite, results in a mountain of internal contradictions. And a decade ago, a younger LarsPorsenna watched these episodes, and the weird vibes given off by all the inconsistencies left a damaging and lasting impact on my brain.